So licensing is probably the most lucrative way to earn money as a musician. It's pretty tricky sometimes, so you kind of do need an attorney to at least like glance at the document to see what you're signing away. Because essentially when you're licensing something, you're giving part of your music away in some form or another to somebody else to administer for you. Some people take a fixed percentage for a placement. So it might be like, say, 20% to put you in this commercial. Others want like back-end ownership stuff too. So right now I'm in the middle of a contract with a major licensing agency that does a lot of the big TV shows and films and stuff in Hollywood. And they want to have not only a fixed percentage right off the bat, like if it's $20,000 for this song to be used in a commercial or a movie, then they get 20% of that right off the bat. And then also, they then become part owners of that song, which sounds kind of fucked up at first. Because you're like, well, I just signed away part ownership of my music that I wrote to somebody else. But from their perspective, if they're spending so many man hours and their connections that they've built over decades to pitch your unknown band to some cool TV show or whatever that's going to net you 20 grand, that'll pay for your tour and your next record, then what will really happen from that is that placement in that TV show really results in more like 50 grand, possibly. Because what you end up with is a ton more fans, a ton more access to shows, a ton more radio airplay, and it just sort of trickles out. There's lots of artists that have been sort of discovered that way in a more mainstream sort of world. So you just have to look at those contracts with an attorney and have them explain to you, this is what you're really talking about here, and are you comfortable with this? So a lot of times what we do is non-exclusive agreements, which the licensing agents hate, because basically it's confusing when you're going to the same TV show from two different sources. So we might have our East Coast rep go to the same show that our West Coast rep's going to, and then the person's like, well, I don't know who owns the tracks or who's like in charge here, so I'm just not going to do any of it. But for us, it's very important not to be stuck with one or the other. So we've worked out non-exclusive agreements in all cases, and it's always been a bitch, and they only do it with bands that they think that it's worth it to them on. So Bel Air's fortunately one of those bands that they're willing to take that chance on. Similarly, I think it's really important to have instrumental options of all your tracks, so that a lot of times what they're doing is just taking a snippet here and there and they're remixing it or doing whatever with it, and it almost doesn't sound like your music anymore, which is totally fine. I mean, if that's what you're comfortable with in that particular licensing agreement, then it's a lot more sensible to have that instrumental as an option than not. Also, the ability to edit your tracks, like if you can edit the track yourself to fit like certain synchronization, that's really important. Because they'll have a 30-second spot, and there's certain hits that they want to accent with your music in there, but your music doesn't fit that scheme, right? Or they might re-edit their video, like we did a Southwest Airlines commercial with Bel Air that they composed specific music to. And it was like there were certain cues that we needed to hit on the 10-second mark, the 13-second mark, and the 22nd mark. And had we not been able to edit our tracks together to make that work for them in an instrumental format, we would have lost out on the ability to fund our record and the tour. Just off that one little thing. Also, lyric sheets are really important, like having a readable lyric sheet, because a lot of times they'll be like, I want music that only has to do with this theme, and it has these 3 words in it. And you're like, okay, so you want it, I mean, it's up to them what they want, right? Why don't you just give them everything you got? So that's instrumental options, the ability to edit to whatever length you need, and the ability to have, here's all my lyrics, done. So the approvals, it's pretty uncommon, but again with Bel Air, it's very important to us that we not be associated with certain types of brands, right? So we'd never do anything with tobacco. We never do anything with like certain things that the band feels that is inappropriate for their creative purpose. So those are immediately off the table. But to protect ourselves from that, we basically say that we have to approve every single licensing agreement that they want to place us in. There might just be like a brand that has a sweatshop in China, and we don't want to be a part of that. So then we choose not to do that licensing. But in order to even have a voice in that, you have to work that into the contract to begin with. And that's another thing that licensors hate, because they don't want to be pitching you to Ralph Lauren if you don't want to like participate with Ralph Lauren at all at the end of the day, right? But certain stuff we will do with Ralph Lauren. But if it's going to be like something cheesy that tarnishes the band's reputation, then we want to have veto power on that. Even if they did pitch it already, even if they spent a bunch of time doing it, I don't really care. If I want to say no for whatever reason, I'm going to say no. And that's just how we deal with Bel Air. So we've been fortunate with our licensing agreements that they are okay with that. You might not be able to work out that deal for yourself, and you just have to figure out what is something that you're comfortable with when it comes to licensing. And maybe you need to call it something totally different. Maybe it's not your cool, awesome, artistic band. It's like your other project that kind of sounds like your cool, artistic brand. You know, that's where the brand comes into play. There's commercial work and there's artwork, and they overlap many times, there's no reason that they have to be mutually exclusive.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I think you're talking about a licensing agent. I know there's some websites that are popping up where you can sort of upload your song, and artists or like companies somewhere supposedly search for songs and choose things. Have you had experience with that, or any recommendations in that area?
We've tried a couple of those, and it always seemed really shady. I mean, for one, they take your stuff and they can kind of do whatever with it. Unlike when you're working with someone who's like been established for a long time, you get sort of two advantages. One, they're obviously really professional. They make their living doing that. It's not some like in the ether sort of thing. But the other thing is that they have a lot more connections. I mean, all these websites depend on people going to these websites to look for stuff, and most like talent buyers or music buyers do not go to stuff like that. That's like, you know, child's play to them. Maybe like some small indie film might go there, which is great. Like you might want to do that too. But if you're looking to get into commercials or like major films or TV shows, then it's almost always like these sort of backroom deals where I know someone that knows someone and they call me and like we figure it out, and it's all about relationships. So like the deal that we're working with in LA, I mean the only reason I'm considering working with them is because they're bringing a Rolodex to the table that's far greater than anything that I can have access to on my own or through any other online source.